17th of November 1869, Port Said, Egypt. The first ship tears through water where sand stood 48 hours before. 3 continents, Europe, Asia, Africa, now connected by 120 miles of engineered waterway. 6,000 workers died carving this passage. The world doesn't know it yet, but global trade just shattered. You're witnessing the opening ceremony. French Empress Eugénie aboard l'Aigle leads 68 vessels through the canal. The journey from Mediterranean to Red Sea, 193 kilometers that eliminate 10,000 kilometers around Cape of Good Hope. Cheering crowds line the banks. Fireworks explode. This wasn't a celebration. It was the death certificate of old trade routes, written in water and blood. What happens in the next 48 hours destroys empires built over centuries. Britain loses its monopoly on India trade. Egypt gains wealth but surrenders sovereignty. By 1870, 486 ships pass through annually. By 1966, 21,250. Witness the moment when distance collapsed, when weeks became hours, when 3 continents fused into one marketplace. The brutal price, 6,000 lives bought 48 hours that rewrote maps, fortunes, and the very meaning of distance itself. Through AI reconstruction, we can now stand exactly where they stood, witness exactly what they witnessed. The 24 hours that changed civilization, rebuilt second by second, stand at Port Said. Dawn, 17th of November 1869. The air tastes of salt and anticipation. Before you stretches what shouldn't exist. 120 miles of water where desert reigned for millennia. Behind you, the Mediterranean. Ahead, passage to the Red Sea. Between them, a decade of engineering that consumed 6,000 lives. You'd hear multiple languages colliding. French dignitaries, Egyptian officials, British observers, engineers from 14 nations, each knowing this moment rewrites geography itself. The canal wasn't supposed to work. Ferdinand de Lesseps, French diplomat turned engineer, proposed the impossible in 1854. Connect Mediterranean to Red Sea through 120 miles of desert. Eliminate the 10,000-kilometer voyage around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. 15 years of doubt preceded this morning. Experts declared it impossible. The desert would swallow any waterway. Sandstorms would fill what machines carved. Salt deposits would poison the passage. Egypt lacked resources for such ambition. De Lesseps ignored them all. Construction began April 1859. 10 years. 25,000 workers at peak operation. Most were Egyptian laborers, forced or paid poverty wages. Conditions were brutal. Temperatures reached 50 degrees Celsius, water scarce, disease rampant. Cholera swept camps multiple times. Conservative estimates, 6,000 died. Some historians suggest far more. Their bodies built the foundation of global trade's future. The engineering challenged everything known. No natural waterway connected the seas. Everything had to be excavated. 74 million cubic meters of sand removed. Machines existed, but muscle dominated. Men with shovels, baskets, bare hands, hour after hour, year after year. The Western world watched Egypt transform desert into passage. Britain resisted from the start. Prime Minister Palmerston saw threats everywhere. A French-controlled canal meant French influence over India trade. Britain's empire depended on that route. Cape of Good Hope was longer, slower, more expensive, but Britain controlled it. The canal promised to shatter that monopoly. De Lesseps secured funding through shares. The Suez Canal Company formed 1858. French investors dominated initially. Egypt's ruler, Said Pasha, purchased 44%. His successor, Ismail Pasha, inherited both shares and mounting debt. The canal's cost exploded beyond projections. Egypt borrowed heavily. The price of progress, sovereignty mortgaged to European banks. You witness the first light breaking. Hour 1 of the opening. Empress Eugénie arrives aboard l'Aigle, France's imperial yacht. She represents Napoleon III's ambitions. France seeks to demonstrate engineering supremacy. Behind l'Aigle, 67 vessels queue in strict order, British ships included despite London's protests. Trade trumps politics. The procession begins at 8:09 sharp. Legal's engines engage. The sound reverberates across water that shouldn't exist. Crowds erupt. 50,000 spectators line the banks at Port Said alone. They've traveled from across Europe, from Cairo, from Alexandria. Some to celebrate, others to witness potential disaster. This wasn't merely an opening. It was Judgment Day for a decade of promises. But in London, 3 men sat in a room at the Foreign Office, studying a telegram that arrived the previous night. What they read changed Britain's strategy entirely. The canal worked. Ships could pass. Britain's monopoly on India trade ended. Hour 3. You watch Legal navigate the first stretch. The passage narrows in places to 60 meters. One mistake, one grounding, blocks everything. De Lesseps designed passing bays every 8 kilometers. Ships traveling opposite directions must coordinate precisely. Miss the timing, and vessels collide or strand. The procession moves at 8 kilometers per hour. Slower than walking pace. The journey from Port Said to Suez, 193 kilometers, 24 hours minimum. Crew members scan the water constantly. Despite dredging, despite surveys, despite a decade of preparation, the canal bed remained partially unknown. Sandbanks shifted. Currents behaved unpredictably. 67 vessels follow Legal in formation. Egyptian boats, French military ships, British merchant vessels, Austrian frigates, Russian traders. Each represents a nation calculating what this passage means for their economy. The procession itself was diplomacy through engineering. Who travels where in the order reveals power hierarchies. You'd see something strange by hour 4. The canal banks aren't natural. They're carved, angular, defiant of nature's curves. Palm trees planted at intervals attempt to soften the geometry. They fail. This is human will imposed on landscape. The desert didn't surrender. It was conquered, meter by meter, year by year. The crowds thin beyond Port Said. But witnesses remain throughout the route. Villages appear at intervals. Ismailia, the canal's midpoint, swells with observers. De Lesseps planned it as a company town. Fresh water channeled from the Nile sustained it. Without that lifeline, the desert reclaims everything within weeks. Egypt's investment exceeded 250 million francs by completion. The nation's economy buckled under debt. Ismail Pasha borrowed from European banks at devastating interest rates. The canal promised future wealth, but present debt consumed Egypt's sovereignty. By 1875, just 6 years after opening, Ismail would be forced to sell Egypt's shares to Britain for $4 million. The very nation that opposed the canal ended up controlling it. Hour 6, midday sun beats down. No shade exists on open water. Crew members cover faces wet cloth against heat stroke. The Mediterranean's coolness fades. The canal water, still settling, lacks the temperature buffer of established waterways. Ships become floating ovens. Passengers retreat below deck despite the occasion's historic nature. But something develops that nobody predicted. As ships pass through the narrowest sections, the displaced water creates currents. Ships feel sudden pulls towards banks. Captains compensate, but the physics are unfamiliar. This waterway behaves differently from rivers or seas. It's artificial and it shows. By hour 8, problems manifest. The fourth ship in procession, an Austrian vessel, drifts too close to the eastern bank. Crew members struggle to correct. Legal continues ahead, unaware. The queue compresses. Ships too close together. If one grounds, multiple vessels face potential collision. Hour 9. You're witnessing something no one expected. The Austrian ship stabilizes, but delay ripples backward. The procession stretches across 40 kilometers now. Lead vessels approach Ismailia, whilst rear vessels remain near Port Said. Communication between ships, non-existent. Signal flags work at short distances, but across kilometers coordination collapses. De Lesseps planned meticulously, but he planned for success, not complications. No backup protocol existed for procession disruption. Captains make individual decisions. Some slow down, others maintain speed. The organized display fragments into cautious navigation. At hour 10, Legal reaches Lake Timsa, a natural lake integrated into the canal's route. Here, water widens. Space to maneuver returns. Ismailia's crowds roar as Empress Eugenie's vessel enters the lake. Fireworks launch despite midday sun. The celebration resumes. But behind the spectacle, the procession struggles. Britain's observers note everything. This isn't the flawless triumph France advertised. Ships navigate successfully, yes. But difficulties emerge. Sandbanks shift. Currents misbehave. The canal functions, but not effortlessly. Britain's government receives reports within 48 hours. The canal threatens British monopoly, but it's vulnerable. Control the canal, and you control the passage. That calculation will define geopolitics for a century. You stand at the halfway point. 12 hours since Port Said's departure, Lake Timsa offers respite. Crews rest. Passengers emerge on deck. The mood shifts. Initial ceremony gives way to exhausted relief. This works. The canal actually works. Ships traverse where camels once struggled. But someone watching understood what others missed. Ferdinand de Lesseps stands on the shore, observing the procession. He sees the Austrian vessel's difficulty. He sees the stretched queue. He knows that problems on opening day, with perfect weather, ideal conditions, and slow speeds, predict worse during routine operation. The canal succeeds, but it's fragile. Hour 13. The procession resumes southward, Timsa to the Bitter Lakes. This section proved most challenging during construction. Salt deposits so thick they crystallized into rock. Workers blasted through formations that resisted conventional excavation. The canal bed here remains shallower than elsewhere. Ships draw more water than anticipated. Clearance measured in centimeters. Egypt's future hangs on those centimeters. If ships ground regularly, trade routes divert back around Africa. Egypt's investment collapses. The debt remains. Ismail Pasha understands this completely. He watches the procession from Ismailia, knowing his nation's sovereignty depends on those ships completing passage successfully. You'd see the desert's true scale here. Beyond the canal's carved banks, nothing. Sand extends to horizons in every direction. Lifeless, waterless. The canal is an anomaly, a thread of possibility through impossibility. Without constant dredging, the desert reclaims it. Nature tolerates this passage but does not accept it. Hour 15. Tension peaks, 2/3 complete. The Bitter Lakes approach. Natural salt lakes, partially incorporated into the route, but connecting lakes to canal required massive excavation. The engineering here is newest, least tested. If anything fails, it fails here. The procession enters the Great Bitter Lake. Water deepens. Ships relax into space, but the southern exit narrows again, 60 meters wide. Single-file passage. The queue condenses. Ships that spread across Lake Timsa's width compress into line. Collision risk returns. At hour 16 you witness the darkest moment. A British merchant vessel, 8th in procession, misjudges the southern exit. Its bow drifts portside, scraping the western bank. Sand churns. The vessel shudders, stops. Behind it, 3 ships slow abruptly. The queue halts. Minutes pass. Crew members pole against the bank, attempting to dislodge. L'Aigle continues ahead, now 25 kilometers distant. Empress Eugenie remains unaware. The ceremony's choreographed perfection shatters. For 16 hours, the procession maintained unity. Now it fractures. The stranded vessel blocks passage. Ships behind cannot proceed. Ships ahead pull farther away. De Lesseps's nightmare manifests. One grounding paralyses the entire route. If this occurs on opening day, what happens during routine traffic? Future commercial viability questions itself in real time. Engineers rush along the canal's banks. Calculations happen frantically. Dredging equipment mobilized from Ismailia. But moving machinery takes hours. The procession faces potential overnight delay. The celebration's triumphant narrative collapses into logistical crisis. 15 minutes later, a decision. Deliberately flood the area around the stranded vessel. Additional water may lift it enough to free, Pumps engage. Water pours from portable tanks. It's improvisation, not protocol. But it works. After 27 minutes stranded, the British vessel dislodges. The procession continues, but everyone saw the canal functions, but barely. Control it, and you control the vulnerability. Hour 18. Dusk approaches. The procession limps toward Suez. Legless passengers celebrate, unaware of the grounding behind them. Ships 7 through 15 navigate cautiously now, traumatized by near disaster. Speed drops further. 8 kilometers per hour becomes 5. The 24-hour estimate stretches toward 30. You've witnessed the truth. The canal isn't a triumph yet. It's a gamble that nearly failed on day one. Engineers note every problem: the Austrian drift, the British grounding, the communication gaps, the shifted sandbanks. Operational protocol needs complete revision. But none of this appears in official reports. France declares flawless success. Egypt celebrates economic transformation. Britain quietly notes every weakness whilst planning how to exploit them. Hour 20. Full darkness. Ships navigate by canal-side lanterns, positioned every 500 meters. The lights flicker across water, transforming the passage into a glowing thread through black desert. Passengers on deck see nothing beyond the lantern's reach. The desert vanishes. Only the canal exists. L'Aigle reaches Suez at hour 21. Crowds explode into celebration. Fireworks illuminate the Red Sea entrance. Empress Eugénie disembarks to fanfare. Speeches proclaim engineering victory, France's glory, Egypt's future, the dawn of a new era. Behind the celebration, ships 10 through 15 remain mid-canal. They'll reach Suez by morning. The procession that started as unified spectacle ends fragmented across 193 kilometers. But the fragmentation doesn't matter. Ships passed, Mediterranean, connected to Red Sea. The impossible occurred. Hour 24. Dawn breaks again. The final vessels enter Suez. 67 ships completed passage. 0 sank. 0 catastrophically failed. The canal survived its first test. Barely, but survival counts. You've witnessed the 24 hours that transformed global trade, but you've also seen what official histories erase: the vulnerability, the near failures, the improvisation that saved ceremony from disaster. The canal worked, but it worked because engineers, captains, and crews adapted in real time to problems nobody anticipated. Egypt gained the canal. 6 years later, Britain bought Egypt's shares for $4 million, seizing control. By 1882, Britain occupied Egypt militarily, citing canal security. The passage that promised Egyptian prosperity delivered foreign occupation. In 1870, 1 year after opening, 486 ships transited the canal. By 1966, 2,250 annually. Global trade exploded. Voyages shortened from 12 weeks to 12 days. Goods reached markets faster. Costs plummeted. European imperialism accelerated, fed by efficient access to Asia and Africa. But the 6,000 workers who died building it never saw a single ship pass. You've stood at Port Said at dawn, watching 3 continents connect. You've witnessed the procession's fragmented reality. You've seen the British vessel ground, threatening the entire opening. You've experienced the 24 hours when distance collapsed, when trade routes rewrote themselves, when empires recalculated their strategies. History remembers triumph. You witnessed survival. The canal's opening wasn't flawless engineering perfection. It was improvisation under pressure, near failure, saved by desperate adaptation, celebration built on hidden crisis. The 6,000 lives bought passage through the desert. But those lives also bought Britain justification for occupation, Egypt's surrender of sovereignty, and a century of geopolitical conflict centered on a 120-mile waterway through sand. 3 continents connected in 48 hours. But the cost, paid across 150 years of consequences still unfolding. Distance collapsed that day. But the distance between the ceremony's public narrative and private reality remained vast. You witnessed both. You saw what crowds cheered and what engineers feared. The canal worked. Barely. and barely proved enough to change civilization forever. Which moment of those 24 hours would you have most wanted to witness? The celebration at Port Said's departure? The grounding at Bitter Lakes? The improvised rescue? The arrival at Suez? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for witnessing history with us. You were there. You witnessed the 24 hours that changed civilization.